The Democrats in Virginia were just handed a huge defeat. At the state level, their Supreme Court in Virginia struck down the latest efforts to redistrict their state and basically negate any Republican representation. Let's get into all the details that you have to know.
From the Virginia State Supreme Court ruling the process to redraw that state's congressional maps is unconstitutional. They had a referendum on this statewide. Shannon Bream is here to join Instant Reaction. Shannon, welcome to our coverage. Good day to you. A couple of things here just come to mind. Barack Obama was out there campaigning
That's right.
to make sure people were into this issue and would get out. It passed, but not by a lot, but it did pass. And it would have effectively, Democrats believe, made it 10-1 Democrats to Republicans. I think the current figuration is 6-5.
Right.
So this is thrown out. Is that the end of the line for Shannon?
It sounds like it, because this was an issue of the Virginia Constitution. It was a state law issue, and critics of this referendum have said from the beginning that Democrats were on thin ice because they did not follow procedures as outlined by state law and state constitution. And what the court ended up saying here is that violation irreparably undermined the integrity of the entire voting referendum, said it makes it null and void. And for that reason, they say the congressional district maps issued by the court in 2021, the old maps are the ones that they've got to use for the upcoming congressional election. Now, this was a state matter. Virginia's Supreme Court, the highest court in that state, it's a Commonwealth, they'll remind you, made this decision. Now, it's not out of the realm of possibility that challengers to this decision would try to find some federal hook for it, to try to get to the Supreme Court to say that there is some U.S. constitutional violation in the way that this ruling was made. It's a very tough ask, but I wouldn't be surprised if they try to do it, because what have you got to lose at this point?
Exactly, and I wouldn't be surprised either if the Virginia Democrats do that. The point that she's missing here is that they're running out of time, that they can't hustle these types of things through going into midterms because ballots and processes have to be set and then, planned ahead on. So this could potentially be an issue going into the 28 presidential election, but for the Democrats in Virginia, specific to their midterm efforts, if they wanted to roll this up to the Supreme Court, obviously they can accept it and expedite it, but I don't see a burning desire to do that, especially when the Supreme Court in the state of Virginia said, no, you broke state or Commonwealth law in what you were doing. Now, keep in mind, this is totally separate than what we saw just last week in the state of Virginia, in the state of Louisiana. In that case, the remapping or gerrymandering of that map was struck down by the federal Supreme Court, specifically because the federal Supreme Court said you were using race as a basis to form your maps, and that's illegal. In this case with Virginia, it got struck down because they just didn't follow Commonwealth law.
Well, what they have to lose is face. I didn't have time to pull the Hakeem Jeffries soundbite right afterwards, and he went to the podium and he said, F-A-F-O, and we've got you. And then for like 48 hours, there was news coverage saying, well, the Democrats really flipped the script of redistricting on the president. Then this week, the president won those races in Indiana to try to put that back in. You had Tennessee do what it did. You had the Supreme Court just last week. And so now I sort of feel that the Virginian Democrats irritated everybody, made everybody mad, and then they lost. And so what they could lose is, one, self-respect maybe, but also funding and the seats that they thought they were going to win.
So again, all of this is going down to the state's ability to form their congressional maps for D.C. representation. And what we're seeing now is that the latest count is that the Democrats are standing to lose somewhere in the neighborhood of 15 to 20 total seats going into the midterms. So that would take the Republican majority of just a couple well into double digits, which would give Mike Johnson, hopefully he's not the speaker for the second term, but that would give the Republicans in Congress specifically a major advantage. And what it would also do, and I mentioned this in my breakdown of the Supreme Court case last week, if this is true, what the Supreme Court said, and if these other states now, take Virginia out of it, but the other states that have then set into play, Florida being one of them, updated maps, if what the Supreme Court said is true, then the Democrats were holding seats based on racial demographics, i.e., now a new map is in and Democrat districts are evaporated. And if that's the case, then the question is, how long have they been doing this? And ultimately, we can conclude that the Democrats have held seats based on race for, I think, decades, for multiple election cycles. I'm curious what you think, and I'm curious what your impression is with Hakeem Jeffries threatening the Supreme Court in Virginia. Now this week with this FAFO, right? I think he is, and the Democrats are in the process of the FO stage of FAFO. Curious what your thoughts are. Hey, if you've yet to subscribe to America First Alerts, you can do that right over here. Please join us. We'd love to have you along for the ride. And we have an awesome set of stories right here. Make sure you watch those. Those are all coming up next.